So then we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the Word. This translation is from the original documents of the Hebrews of old, from the time of the prophets of Israel, indicating the time of the end and how then the nations should perceive the end of time based upon the prophecies of Yirmiyahu, Zechariah, Ezekiel, and then Daniel. In these days where the election is coming, it is absolutely amazing what is going on because of black people and white people do not get along. There was a lady that was nearly burned to death because of the Ku Klux Klan, KKK. Incredible. Would they spend the time in burning a person because of a t-shirt? What a shame, what a scoundrels. Because of a t-shirt? These people are mad. Those people are from the 60s. Might ended up causing civil war. It's insane what these people were doing. The Messiah came, and he came to rescue the Gentiles, so then the holy cities would be a beacon of truth for them. And that's the time that we are transitioning ourselves from the 1,000 years of lie back to the truth. There is no big deal in it. It has enough money and market for every person. As we understand from the scripture, the Chinese, they are leading the world's market. And in the very near future, they're going to set up their own system so every person with a personal computer can invest and receive. Why are they destroying each other with these crazy clans? Read the scripture. People are going to be extremely busy. It's part of the transitional time that we are facing. As it was then spoke before regarding the Mayan calendar, even they themselves about 1,000 years ago perceived that there was then a shift in the spirit. And they had predicted there was an end of this spiritual linkage with Gentile ruling and is spiritual, or at least what they thought was spiritual. But then for people going around with those crazy KKK clothing and burning people, they are crazy. They are inviting disaster upon their lives because as they understand, they read the news, if they observe in Africa how they react to skirmishes, they are extremely fierce. You're going to end up burning the town if these people are not cautious. Because of a person wearing a t-shirt? There are lots of plans coming up. We must be, hold down our anger. The nation worked up to this point, why wouldn't in the future? That's maddening, people burning other people. It's crazy. So what is the deal? What was then back then when they elected the president, and what is it now? Why was then special then and it's not special now? What is the deal? We were piling up death like crazy, and those had to be taken care of. People lost their reasons. What was the Messiah then speaking when he was then teaching the people? He was speaking of his holy presence of the future, of a transitional time from the first and second service. He was explaining they can't have their focus upon this earth. There is a new earth coming in, or a new city where then Jerusalem is going to be the capital of this planet. Read the scripture. You find in Revelation and find in Yeshayahu, 66th chapter. It's inconceivable people would do this. So what is it next then? People wearing Nazi clothing and beat up Jews then? Is that what it is? For what reason? There's no reason for it. What the Messiah told them to do was then go around the world and form holy cities. That's what he said. You simply would cluster around. They either would purchase a farm, would establish a tabernacle over there, and would resume the services. As they were saved from Egypt through a mighty hand of Moses and our own, then through mighty signs and wonders, they went through the Red Sea, and then they were parked near the mountain, and up the mountain Moses went. He went to get the holy laws. He started the first service. Then later they were given the promised land. They had a transfer of the tabernacle onto the promised land, and they trained again until the Messiah came. And then they would go around the world and form holy cities. The Gentiles would be ruling at the secular world. But then came the first 1,000, as you read in Revelation 20th chapter. His people would be in charge for 1,000 years, and they did. When the cities were then given directives to the world. Then in 1009, Jerusalem was then destroyed by the Muslims, along with the tomb. The tomb that's there in Jerusalem is not the original tomb. It was carved as a symbol of the Messiah then returning. But it's not the original tomb. The original tomb was destroyed, along with the city. Then the world at that point, the destruction of the cities went so far as going to the very city and then destroying the city and the tomb. Thus, Satan the destroyer would not have any place else to destroy, so that's why he went to prison. But then his facet of deceit then had taken over. That's when then the Mayas perceived. There was a shift in the spirit over there, and they felt, and then they began the calculations. That's why they have those calendars of theirs, and they had nearly predicted properly, except for 36 months. But close enough. Not bad for a Gentile calendar. And then ended in 2009. We are simply transitioning ourselves back to the truth. So why are we then provoking ourselves of a civil war, being similar as the Messiah speaking with his own people? Isn't that magnificent, the temple? And the Messiah said, no, it's not. And in fact, this temple is coming down. And then he couldn't believe it. And a few years later, few decades later, sure enough, it came down. Because there was a transitional time and people should not be focused upon the temple. They had to be focused upon the tabernacles because he came to tabernacle with us. That's why when the Messiah came, he was on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles because he tabernacled with us. So then his people would go around the world and would be tabernacling around. We are barely understanding how to read the scripture, and we are already nearly burning each other. Them scoundrels were those KKKs. should round up some black people and they know what to do with them. Crazy. Never saw this in my entire life. So much competition because of skin color. Oh boy. Nearly insanity of these people. So the Messiah then told his people to go around the world and form a holy tabernacles. Meant everywhere they went, they were then to form a holy city and do what Moses told them to do, and then they would be functioning and helping the Gentiles with their troubles. It's no big deal. They're not going to be influencing or, in other words, taking over people's governments. They are there as a help. If you have trouble, show up and then they give you an answer. But then you're not taken by the hand. You have to turn around and then do your own. That's when you hear in the previous covenant, who then is bringing a glad report? Because the word of Yahweh then went out and then came back in and then was completed. So there was joy in the camp. And then the whole scenario, what's going on in our elections, is simply vote for Obama. That's where we are heading towards. The Chinese is backing him up because trade-wise speaking, he has a solider plan than the other candidate. And in terms of trade, it's most important for us to make sure we can recuperate our trade ability. And the Chinese, through their observances, they understand that Obama is the best and fits the situation. So then we vote for him. What is the problem? If the Chinese would found then that the GOP candidate was then a higher plan, then would vote for the GOP candidate. But it's not the case. Now because of white or black supremacy, then people begin to burn each other. Ugh. There's a lot of work for every person in this country. As we understand, the Chinese are going to start taking over, so then they begin to give them a bit of a space for them to navigate out of their area so they can do patrols for us, so that we can then retrieve. It would be then a tremendous relief for our country not have to pay so much to do patrols. But then we have to humble ourselves, not try to be so mighty and high, because it's becoming very expensive. So then the Messiah, he spoke in many words related with the end of times. And then also he explained the entire Torah, the prophets and the writings. And then as we understand, we have only 10% of the recorded sharings of the Messiah. And these 4 views, a lot of it is repetitious, because then the Gospels, they were put together in haste. As you begin to understand the prophecies, because he could never complete any part of the Torah without having a specific prophecy related with the end of times and with the completion of the spring feast. Whatsoever he spoke regarding the future and its completion was then related with the Torah. It was traced back to the Torah. Merely instructions. Because with the instructions then a person can understand what it means, times and seasons, and then the prophecies. So it wasn't complicated, but then when Yohanan was starting then his own sharing with the people, and he was given then the third role of a vengeance, he was then to give the people the understanding of the vengeance to come. Because what was then the objective from Shaliach Shaul when he went out and then began to relink the Gentiles and began to link then his people with Ruach HaKodesh? Was then for them to form the holy cities, and then they would promote then the people, and they would be acquainted with yet the second half of the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, named the vengeance, or then the autumn feast. This was the whole purpose. And then we understand from the time of the end, we have around 20 years, maximum of 22 years of history yet left. How do we calculate this? The big star. The star of Bethlehem. It was recorded secularly, so then the computer system can take the particular time, even though in a regular secular calendar, and then because of the lunar eclipses of the time, then the computer was able to make calculations then to understand then the original calendar based upon then the star and the readings of the time. So when you have, for instance, a Shabbat that starts during the time of eclipse, then you understand. Then the computer can make the adjustments. It's not truly complicated. So he was born in 3999. He spent time with the Samaritans, roughly 4031. Because he was then placed on a stake in 4032. So from 4031, 2000 years, 6031. We are in 6012. So there is not much time. But then if we try to manipulate the system to fit our own understandings, then forget it. It won't help. It won't do any positive for us because we have already the records and then we have the time of the end. We can't work against those. You must work in favor with. So then the Chinese, they're going to leave the world's market. So then we make sure then we start giving them glimpses of leadership of the market. Whatsoever the nations can do to make sure they implement their system, the faster they do it, the more we are in compliance with the word. And the more we benefit from. But the nations, they try to be mighty and hidey. How are they going to do it? They can't do it because they don't understand the scripture. Time of the end, third part of the ships located in Asia. Why is Asia? Because then Shaliach Shaul was making his roots and he was teaching the people of the kingdom to come government and teaching them how to do trade via this new government to come. That's why they became to be so prosperous. So at the end, obviously they retained the teachings of Shaliach Shaul of trade and then became the strength of the future. So if we are wise, we then very wisely we retrieve our forces from the world very wisely and then let them take over, because then we relieve ourselves from a huge debt, from huge expenses. And then we become part of their system. When it comes out, it's already coming out, because there is a bank in our country and then many other banks would do, and they are linking up already with investments. So the system is coming. And the gap from religion and secular rulership, those are separated. we've reached the point where there is a separation from those, and they don't return. Because there is a new phase, and then the time for the deceit then is expired. And the Spirit is going to be floating around until it finds the proper place, and there is the holy city. There is a lot of work to be done. And as we understand how were the English ways of the past, because we understand the Chinese, they are leading the world's market. That's no question about it. But in terms of cultures they won't change, because those are particulars of every country. However, how they deal with each other, obviously we should return to our English ways of doing it. And it is badly, in quote, eroded. There are so many people trying to weasel their way out of responsibilities and paying taxes, taxes evasions. There are a lot of scoundrels in the system, and they must be caught. And we should clean up ourselves and make sure then we do what we used to do. So then we can do trade properly. And then extraction of our own petroleum, natural gas, and then privatization. That's an absolutely a must. Turn a private sector and then let them take care of them. Because then they only receive a protocol of what they should do, and then they do their work. So it's got a lot of work ahead of us, and we can't expand as we would expand in the future. We must have then under the control finances in order to have our future secured. But if we spend as we used to spend, then our future becomes in jeopardy. This is the only country that maintains its agencies without privatization while the economy is in crisis. Doesn't make any sense. Truly doesn't. Any federal agency that does not produce, it's not profitable, and it's not related with important tasks, and they have to get rid of it. Turn to the private sector. Let the private sector make a profit out of it without jeopardizing the services. So the Messiah, he came and he did his part, and we should do our part. Our part then simply is encouraging the Hebraic people that do know the Messiah to return and then resume their services. Those were the Messiah's orders, not our orders. The Messiah told them to do. Go around the world and form holy cities. And then the part that Messiah was speaking, and he himself would be amongst them, of course. He came to tabernacle with them. He would be then tabernacling with them while they are forming holy cities. He would never leave from the Holy of Holies. He would be there, and they would be servicing him and then helping the Gentiles outside. This is the salvation plan. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.